Well, folks, from time to time, I have the distinct privilege and opportunity to talk to some very special guests. And today, of course, is going to be one of those moments because the person that you see on the screen right now is somebody who I've only known for a short period of time relative to both of our ages, actually, our cumulative ages. But it feels like I've known this brother for a lifetime. And of course, we are brothers for life because of some things that have happened in our lives over the last bit of time, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that. But his beginning goes so much further back that we're going to try to get as much in as possible. Kevin Powell is with me today. Let me tell you a little bit about Kevin. Kevin is a 2024 Grammy nominated poet. We'll hear a lot more about that in just a few moments. He's one of the most celebrated political, cultural, literary, and hip hop voices in America today. So he checks all of my boxes. And not only does he check those boxes, but he's got substance to go along with it. Kevin Powell, welcome to the Second Chance radio show platform.
I love the name of your show, Brother Kenneth, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And just, it's an honor to know you. You have a profound life and as well. And just thank you for allowing me to be a part of your life. Thank you.
Man, listen, you are absolutely a special person. You know how oftentimes people say that when a person walks into the room or when you engage a person for the first time, it's like a spirit precedes them.
Thank you.
And sometimes we make a decision as to who that person might be, what they might have to offer, and what kind of energy they bring into the place. And ever since I first met you in person, you have been nothing but a person of excellence and a person of inspiration in my life. And I want to say thank you for what you have shared with me on this journey.
Well, I just all praises due to God first and foremost. I'm just trying to listen to God, sir, more than ever, and do what God tells me to do. And I think it's to be a servant, to show up and to show up with humility. I think about that a lot. My mother raised me not to self brag in her South Carolina accent. Don't self brag, boy. You know, and I take that very seriously. So I love people. I love all people, and I love being a helper, I would say, doing God's work. That's what's important to me.
Kevin, I'm going to start right there because I have paid you this compliment so many times outside of your presence, and I want to do it in your presence right now. I watched you move almost surgically through our community on at least two occasions where you had a chance to come to this community and share your gifts. One was the Martin Luther King Jr. breakfast that took place
Yeah.
in the past, as well as an opportunity to have a very special Black History Month program sponsored by my office. But I watched you in both of those venues and the time that you took with people that showed you were genuinely interested in each person, that there was an authenticity with
Thank
which you
you.
met people, an enthusiasm, an inspirational kind of space that you carved out for everybody. People walked away from engaging with you feeling special. And I think that
Mm,
speaks to what you just shared.
wow. Well, there's a lot of ways I can respond to it. I mean, first and foremost, again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I have to thank God and always excite God first and foremost. Uh, I don't judge anyone. Folks are Christian, Jewish, Muslim. I even acknowledge folks and respect folks who are atheists and agnostic. I believe that we have to embrace all kinds of human beings and all kinds of beliefs and non-beliefs. But I was raised to center God, and I remember, Brother Kenneth, when I was in college, we would bring different kind of speakers to our school. I won't say the names of the speakers, but just like I'm sure you experienced, a lot of famous speakers, a lot of famous people, well-to-do people. Some of them were writers, authors. Some of them were civil and human rights activists, and some of them were elected officials. And what was striking to me were the people who actually stayed and engaged with us and didn't say they were too busy. They didn't have time to sign a book. They didn't have time to shake our hands. Didn't have time to take a photograph. And then there were people who just came strictly for the check. And I always said to myself, I'm not going to be the person who's going to be there just for the check. That I think, that's not what this is about. I mean, we all need to make a living. I'm thankful to be able to make a living at what I do as a writer and speaker. But, I think about my late friend, and I don't want to get emotional here right at the beginning of the call or on the call at this call at all, this interview at all. But my friend Radcliffe Bailey, visual artist, a great visual artist that I hope people, listeners out there, will check out, viewers will watch, check out his work. He's from Atlanta, Georgia. He just died, sadly, in the fall of last year, 54 years old, only 54. And he told me something that really stuck with me. A couple of stories, real quick. This definitely helped to define who I am. When he was a boy in Atlanta, he got to meet people like Romare Bearden and Jacob Lawrence, two of our great black male visual artists in this country's history. And that is how he ended up becoming an artist, because they took the time to talk with him when he was a little boy. And I just said, wow, and whether it's someone who's 8 years old or 80 years old, I give everyone the same attention. I told my wife when we met, I was like, listen, this is just how I roll. I'm going to talk to everyone on this line. I'm going to try to remember all of their names. I'm going to shake all their hands. I'm going to hug people. I'm going to take pictures with people, because everybody's valuable to me equally. And if they take the time to come out to the Dr. King event in Huntsville, come out to the Black History Month event in Huntsville, and ask questions and want to take pictures, like your Black History Month program that we did was phenomenal. I enjoyed that dialogue. Those are the kind of dialogues that I think we need all over the country. And I feel like we have a responsibility, if you have a platform like I do, like you do, to engage with people, because I think that's part of the problem with our country right now. People are so polarized, so divided, so much false information and misinformation and just outright lies going on, because people are not dialoguing with each other. And I take that very seriously. And Radcliffe ended up becoming one of our most successful visual artists, because he remembered the impact of Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden just taking the time to speak to him as a boy.
Mm. Very powerful indeed. You, of course, as I said, was a 2024 Grammy nominated
Yeah, it's
spoken
deep.
word poet. I tell you,
Yeah.
this amazing experience. Grocery shopping with my mother was the project, and of course, has gotten a lot of traction. Lots of people, including myself, had told you that even though your name was not the one that was called when they said, and the winner is,
Right.
that just being nominated means that you won. And of course, you've been in this space for so long in significant ways that, again, congratulations on the nomination. This was huge. Talk to us a little bit about that project.
Well, Grocery Shop with My Mother is dedicated to my mother. She just turned 80 years old last year in August of 2023. And she, was sick a few years back. I'm an only child, was raised by my mother in Jersey City. She had migrated in the 60s, part of the last wave of the Great Migration, as you all know, from the South to the North. And I was born in Jersey City. A lot of my cousins they either settled in North Jersey or New York City. I have a lot of relatives in New York City where I am. I'm in Brooklyn right now. Been here for a long time. And she did an amazing job as a black woman by herself. Unfortunately, my father, who was about a dozen years older than her, just was not a good man the way you're a good man, and the way you described, your father and men in your life. I try to be that, but he was damaged. He was damaged by the society. He was damaged by the racism. He was damaged by a lot of things, and he just at some point refused to take ownership and just disappeared, honestly. And they were never married, but at least I saw him 2 or 3 times until I was 8 years old, and then he disowned me. And but my mother is the reason why I'm a writer. She taught me words when I was 3 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old. And I remember vividly. Took me to the library for the first time. I was 8 years old. Fell in love with books and reading books and going to the library. I love libraries to this day because of my mom. And my mother didn't read books. She didn't read books. She just knew that she needed to expose her son. This is a woman with an 8th grade education herself, born in 1943 in the Jim Crow South, the segregated South. But somewhere in her, she understood, that education was going to be a key for her son. If I can just get an education, I can have a better life than she had had. And she was right, and it's profound, as you know, Kenneth, as you get older. Once you get to your 40s, 50s, and 60s, if your parents are still with us, we start to become the parents, and they start to become the children, particularly if they have health issues, the way my mother did. And so that was the basis of the poem "Grocery Shopping with My Mother." It literally started off as social media posts. Hey, I'm grocery shopping with my mother, da da da, and so many people were responding to it. It was incredible. People were sharing stories about their mothers, their fathers, folks who had lost their parent or parents. I mean, people of all backgrounds. It wasn't just black folks. It was white folks, Latinx folks, Asian folks. I was struck by it. And I decided to make it into a book. And obviously I thought about things like Langston Hughes's famous poem, Mother to Son, and reversing that. I thought about all the great songs like Dear Mama by Tupac Shakur, and I just was thinking about the book. At some point, I said, you know what? I've always wanted to do poetry and music. Maya Angelou did it. Nikki Giovanni did it. Mary Baraka did it. Sonia Sanchez did it. Obviously the last poets famously, Gil Scott-Heron. And then I'm just a lover of music. Like, one of the things that's connected us is our profound love of jazz. And I've noticed that there's been so many poets who have done work with jazz musicians, Langston Hughes, who's my favorite writer ever. I was scared, Kenneth Anderson, to do the album. I was terrified because I've been a poet for a long time, but I'm a poet who's used to having a page and just reading from it. And thank you very much. That was great. Then get off the stage. Not sit. We sat in the studio for 8 months, taking 36 poems, pulling 9 poems out of it, and then setting those 9 poems to music. And then because my musical tastes are all over the place, I'm like, well, I need a gospel, and I need jazz, I need reggae, I need R&B, I need folk. We just kind of, and we work with some amazing musicians, and that's how it happened. And we decided to keep the same title, the same cover. We just flipped it from the book to the album. Just says "Grocery Shop My Mother," the album. And it got nominated for a Grammy. And what's profound about it, as I'm saying this to you, this is probably one of the first interviews I've done, or the only interview I've done. The day that I was nominated for the Grammy in November 23, I landed in Atlanta to say goodbye to my friend Radcliffe Bailey as he was dying.
Wow.
So literally on the same day, it was this euphoria of being nominated, that I'm saying goodbye to my friend who I used to sit in his house in Atlanta and watch jazz documentaries on Eric Dolphy and Charlie Mingus and the Thelonious Monk. He actually helped to fuel my love of jazz when we were coming up as young artists, me a writer, him a visual artist. Yeah, so it's deep. It's deep, man. But yeah, I'm so proud of the album. You're right. You win by not getting nominated. And it's definitely, it's a profound experience, man. It's a profound experience. I've never been someone who's, chased awards, anything like that. People have always said to me, Kevin, how come you haven't had more fellowships, more grants? And I've gotten things through the years. I just got a big grant from the Ford Foundation for our film that's coming out later this year on Black manhood, Black fatherhood. But I've really just been someone who just really wanted to focus on the work. But the Grammy nomination was really a wow moment. It was wow. It's like wow, like wow.
It's one
Yeah.
of those notes, I'm sure, that are points of life that you will note for the rest of your life in so
Yeah.
many ways and for so many reasons. The juxtaposition of all the things that were happening, too. You're talking about losing a friend and landing on that day to say goodbye, and this moment of being both on the mountaintop as well as in the valley. Those events, those moments in life, those intersections in our lives really challenge us in ways to think deeper and to look deep into ourselves. And I'm sure that this journey for you has also been a little bit of introspection that has taken place.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And I'm hoping you'll talk a little bit about that.
Yes. I mean, one, thinking about constantly my relationship with my mother, and I mean, she's from the old world. So, the old world black folks start talking about dying a lot. And I'm like, Mom, stop talking about that stuff. What I'm saying? But practical things come into place. Like you have to have power of attorney, and you got to make sure your name is on everything. And it's profound, so you feel the mortality of life. And I know, you and I know we are of the same era in so many different ways. And we've, here you and I are standing, but we've lost a lot of people, especially a lot of Black males who have not made it past their 40s, 50s, or 60s, who have not made it to 70 or 80. And so I've thought about all those things. I mean, literally, I have a poem in the book, on the album and the book, about Kobe, losing Kobe Bryant. I'm a big sports fan, and I was actually at his memorial at the Staples Center in February 2020, right before COVID hit. And it was incredible. But I remember feeling sadness, and little did I know, in the next couple of years, we'd lose everyone from Kobe Bryant, Chadwick Boseman, and thank God some of the older brothers like Bill Withers and Luke Gossett Jr., who we just lost recently, lived long lives. They got to live past, 70 to 80 and what have you. But I've thought about that a lot, especially as a Black male, my own life. Like, what do you want to do with your life? And I decided I've got to do things that make me happy, Kenneth. I've got to do things that I've always wanted to do. I've got to do things that I've been putting off. It's kind of like how you and I've been talking about, if I can say it, you writing. Your life story is so incredible. And I'm glad that you're going to do that, in addition to everything else that you do, that's amazing, including your DEI work, especially with all these attacks on DEI. We need you and your voice more than ever, your insights more than ever. But I'm like, you can't wait, Kevin. You can't wait. And so, that was the thing, because if I can be fully honest here, since you said this is about second chances, 4 years ago, this time in 2020, New York City was the epicenter. Your hometown, my adopted hometown, was the epicenter of COVID, and I was going through a divorce. I had no money because all the speaking engagements had dried up because you couldn't travel, you couldn't go anywhere. The divorce cleaned me out financially, spiritually, mentally. I was broken, sir. I was very, very broken, if I can be honest about it, because I think that men have to be honest about things that hurt us. And I didn't know where to go. And I remember being in a very dark place, and it was such a profound sadness I hadn't felt in years. Depression. It was deep depression. And by the grace of God, and I remember a friend of mine, he sent me a very simple message. Kevin, if you give up as a Black person, as a Black man, that's going to be a victory for racism. That's what he said to me. That's going to be a victory for racism, and that's ignoring what your ancestors have gone through. And so when I was there the second time with you recently in February, in Huntsville, and you were kind enough to take me to Oakwood, I thought about that when you took me to the gravesite of Little Richard. And I thought about that when you took me to the space where our ancestors were, the slave cemetery, quote unquote, because I said, man, I can't give up ever because of what all these folks went through before me, but I do think, what I got from this poetry project, and it's interesting you bring that up because it was in June of 2020 when Black Lives Matter exploded. It was a month after George Floyd got killed, which was May 2020. I wrote the poem We Them People, which ended up becoming the first poem on the album. And I just started writing poetry in 2020 in ways I hadn't in years. And I honestly feel that the poetry, the writing gave me a new life again, gave me a second chance, if you will.
Wow.
It reminded me of who I was and where I came from. And it's like, strip away, Kevin, what, money will come again. These material things are irrelevant. Who are at your core? And because I was by myself, I was one of the many people in places like New York in COVID who were single. So I had no choice, Kenneth, but to sit with myself and just look in the mirror and say, Kevin, who are you? Where'd you come from? And where do you want to go now? You know what I mean? And that's the second chance. And I think we have many second chances. When I heard the title of your show, I was like, that's a great title, because we can't take for granted these additional chances that we're given by the divine, by the spirit world, whatever we believe in, even if it's just, just the universe. You're here now, don't take for granted. So I've had a renewed sense of purpose the last couple of years, which is, do everything you've wanted to do. The money will come, live a simple life though. I've never been materialistic. This chain is the only piece of jewelry I got. This cross, because I'm a Christian, this ankh, because I'm an African, you know what I'm saying? I'm clear about my identities. Other than that, man, I just, and if you just are kind to people and do good for people, like when I was with you, I know this is about me, but what was striking to me is when I was with you in Huntsville, how many people said thank you to you, Mr. Anderson, who acknowledge you and the things that you've done in that community. And as I've traveled this country, I've been to all 50 states in this country, literally for all 50 states, by the grace of God. Me, a poor boy from the ghetto who didn't even get on a plane until I was 24. And I can count on one hand the number of people I've met like you in communities where people are like, this is a good person who really has helped a lot of people. And when I die, Mr. Anderson, I want people to be able to say that about me. He really cared about people. Yeah.
Very powerful indeed. I am reminded of the impact that the internationally acclaimed Aeolians had on you
Oh my
during
God.
your visit the first time to Huntsville. And then we got a chance to actually connect you with the
Yes.
current director of the Aeolians while you were in town the second time. And I just hope you'll talk a little bit about that, because a lot of folk are listening all over the world today, and they'll know about the Aeolians because they're well-traveled and one of the most phenomenal singing groups you'll ever hear.
Listen, Dr. King Holiday, and I got to shout out my chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated there in Huntsville, who were kind enough to invite me to be the keynote speaker earlier this year. The Aeolians from Oakwood University started singing, Lift Every Voice and Sing, in a way I had never heard in my life. And I was just shook. I would argue that whatever speech I gave and however, whatever ways, some small way it may have touched the people there is because of what I heard the Aeolians do. And I'm excited to say it. I'm just going to say it. I thank you for connecting me with the director. My next album, we're already working on my second spoken word poetry album because we're determined to keep going with this music and the tradition of poetry and music that so many of us have come out of. And we're going to do a record with the Aeolians. I will be back in Huntsville at some point later this year to record that, because I'm like, they're a gift from God. Their voices, the vision of it, and I would hear stories about Oakwood University for years. I would hear stories about the singers from Fisk University. But I'm gonna tell y'all, HBCUs, and I was not blessed to go to HBCU. I didn't even know HBCUs existed until I got to college. But the amount of artistic talent that comes out of HBCUs alone, I mean, come on. So I can't wait to be able to say, I did this record with the Aeolians. I'm going to be the producer of the record is going to be a brother from Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, who produced the Grocery Shop with My Mother song for the current album. He's their musical director, the minister of music. And I'm just excited about bringing people together to Huntsville to make a record that I hope will inspire people. I already know the title of it. I don't want to say it yet, but I'm sketching it out. But it's exciting, man. 50 singers, man. Listen, I'm just like, yo, I can't wait. I can't. And I grew up in the church. I grew up with God, this music, so it means something to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, you were benefited by the Educational Opportunity Fund when you were able to attend Rutgers as a college student. And as I thought about that, I also thought about the fact that the UNCF is celebrating 80 years this year.
Yes.
And I just hope you'll talk a little bit about the significance of these kinds of initiatives in terms of providing opportunities, especially for young people that might be marginalized and would not have an opportunity to attend school, much like yourself.
Listen, I'm a first generation college student, and this is why diversity, equity, and inclusion, affirmative action programs, whatever people want to call them, giving people an opportunity to have an opportunity, as I said in one of my poems many years ago. And here's what's profound about it. In the 1960s, when I was born, I have no memory of the 60s. I'm born in the later 60s, but there was a white brother who was a Republican named Tom Kaine, who was a young state assembly member in New Jersey, where I was born and raised. He was profoundly affected by the assassination of Dr. King. He was profoundly affected by all the uprisings, the rebellions, what some folks may call riots that were happening around the country, as you well know, Brother Anderson. And he decided, Tom Kaine, Kean, people could look up his name because his ancestry, Kane and Livingston, were people who were part of the Revolutionary War period in this country. This is a white brother who comes from tremendous wealth and tremendous privilege. Kane University in New Jersey is named after Tom Kaine's family. He was the person who created the Educational Opportunity Fund because he understood, I'm not just a white person. I'm not just a Republican. I'm not just a wealthy person. But first and foremost, I'm a human being. And I have a responsibility historically, culturally, politically, but most important, morally, to make sure that everyone in this country that we claim is a democracy has the opportunities that I had to at least get a quality education. That was 1968. 50 years later, Kevin Powell, who benefited from that program, got to go to Rutgers University, the State University of New Jersey, was the keynote speaker at the anniversary. And I got to thank Governor Kaine. He eventually became the governor of New Jersey, 2 terms. I got to thank Governor Kaine for creating that program. We sat down privately later. I had a private meeting with them, and it was really profound. And he was disheartened by all the racism that has happened in this country, all the things that were created in the 60s and 70s to improve the country, how it was all being erased. And think about it like this, sir. If there's no Kevin Powell, there's no 16 books. If I didn't get to go to college, there's no 16 books. There's no speeches at Huntsville for Black History Month. There's no speeches in Huntsville for the Dr. King celebration that brought diverse people together. There's no Kevin Powell being able to touch not just Black people, but white people, Latinx people, Asian people. I have young people of all backgrounds who have said to me something about they've read something that I wrote or something like that. This is not bragging. Again, I believe in humility. But if I was not allowed an opportunity to get a quality education, to see what was possible, beyond being a poor black boy in the ghetto with a single mom on welfare, food stamps, government cheese, and the kind of rats and roaches I wouldn't wish on anybody. If I wasn't able to see that there was a world out there beyond that, because someone created a program that was a hand to me, not a hand out, but a hand up, I wouldn't even exist. I don't know what would have happened to me. You know what I mean? And so we need to understand, as we're attacking affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion programs, these programs have actually helped to create people who have become citizens who have helped other people like myself. You know what I mean? And when you deny people the possibility of a better life, I think you're denying your own humanity. You know, you're tearing apart the whole country when you do that. And you're also ignoring the historical realities of racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, all the things that have been set up as barriers to block people. Oh, you're this race, you're this gender identity, you're this class background, you're this age, you know, you're disabled, you're not we can't work with you. I mean, come on now. One of my friends is a sister named Dr. Angel Miles. She's a black woman from Philadelphia who has been wheelchair bound her entire life. Notice what I said, Dr. Angel Miles. She just got her PhD in the last year. This is someone who has had to deal with racism and sexism and ableism, and she has a PhD, and she's one of our most profound scholars and thinkers and experts on DEI, with an emphasis on disability versus ability, or ableism. You know what I mean? Imagine if she didn't have the money for college.
Yeah. That is the story indeed. And the idea that there's so many distractions in terms of people who have demonized these letters, these three letters.
Yeah.
And taken it in a direction that it was never designed to take, who have hijacked the conversation of humanity, moving forward, finding the best in each and every one of us, producing the best quality of life for all human beings, have literally assaulted and attacked these things that are core values of our existence and humanity. And I appreciate you sharing what you shared. We're talking this afternoon with a very special guest. He's Kevin Powell. Kevin is a person that you may recognize for a lot of reasons, because he's commonly seen on a bunch of things, things like ESPN, The Nation, NPR, CNN. He's been quoted in the Washington Post, the New York Times, Esquire, HuffPost, just a few publications and media sources that you may have heard of. And of course, I get to call him the best thing that I can think to call him, brother and friend. And he's on the broadcast this afternoon, and I appreciate him taking this time to do that. You define yourself as a human rights and civil rights activist.
Yes, sir.
Talk about how you define that for yourself.
Oof. Well, I have to be honest. I did not know proper or holistic American history, nor Black American history, the first 18 years of my life. My mother did the best she could. She fought to get me into the best schools in Jersey City. And what I tell people all the time now, I realized that my social studies classes in grade school, my history classes in high school always stopped after World War II, nothing else. I mean, think about it. Here I am, born on the heels of the civil rights movement, but wasn't even learning about the civil rights movement. All we learned was Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat, and Dr. King had a dream, and then he was dead. That was it. And so it wasn't until I got to college, back to Rutgers University, and this incredible opportunity that I was given to go to school, I literally walked into the anti-apartheid movement, which was what was happening in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was in jail, you know, and I was like, all I knew was South Carolina with the word South, and I knew the South Bronx because of the birthplace of hip hop. That's what I knew. You know what I'm saying? I was like, South Africa, I was ignorant. You know, I remember someone showed me an album cover of Malcolm X's Message to the Grassroots speech. And I love Roman numerals because that's what I was a numbers person. I won a math award when I graduated from high school and an English award. I loved learning. I was like, who's Malcolm the 10th? They were like, Malcolm X, not the 10th. I was like, but that experience with the anti-apartheid movement as an 18, 19-year-old changed my life because I realized not only do I not know anything about Africa, I know nothing about Black American history. But then 84, back in the day, in the 80s, I should say, throughout the 80s, Jesse Jackson ran for president twice. And Jesse Jackson for me was what Obama became in 2008 for folks and, later generations, even all of us. But you know what I'm saying? You recall it. It was profound. And I was I was mesmerized by Reverend Jackson. Remember when he came to my campus? I still had the little armband that said I was one of the security people, student security people. It was, so I was learning and I ended up reading everything I could, Kenneth, about the civil rights movement. I was like, because I always loved history. Like I'm a massive sports fan, massive sports fan. So as a kid, the first books I would read would be about the history of baseball, about the history of football, about basketball, anything sports related. And then I applied that so I could run down Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Lincoln, FDR, the Kennedys, John Kennedy, anyway, not Bobby until later, learning about him. But as I learned these things, I decided as a teenager, 18, 19 years old, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be a writer because I knew I wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. And college allowed me this, okay, I can actually write, I can do this. And the second thing is I want to be a human and civil rights activist like all these people I'm reading about. I want to be Fannie Lou Hamer. I want to be Ella Baker. I want to be like Dr. King. I want to be like Malcolm X. I want to be like SCLC, NAACP, SNCC. That's the tradition. That's what I want to do. Thurgood Marshall, that's it. That's that's how it started. That's how it started, for me. And it began with race, very focused as a Black man on race and racism. But over time, I began to realize, and this is post-college, through the years, and of course, traveling expands your mind as much as reading can. If you travel as a non-tourist, as you travel as someone who actually explores the places you go to, I was like, well, I can't just be opposed to hate that's convenient for me. I got to be opposed to all forms of hatred. You know what I mean? And that's where the human and civil rights activist piece comes into. And that's when I began to say both, because I'm like, I don't want to just deal with civil rights and because a lot of times it's narrowly focused on certain things. I want to focus on everything. And I think that's where Dr. King wound up. That's where Malcolm X wound up, both of them at the end of their lives, which is back to what you said, what are we doing with our humanity to help other human beings? That's really what it is for me.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to approach this gift that many of us think about in that way, but of course many of us abuse, and that's
Oh
the
my
gift
God.
of life.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
mentioned hip hop a couple of times, so I better hurry up and not bury the headline. In 2024 and beyond, there'll be this raging debate: Biggie, Tupac, and of course, you're writing a bio on Tupac.
I am.
A much
That's why I got the
studied.
pencil in my ear.
Oh,
In case folks are wondering, this is my
yeah,
old journalism habit.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, it's a work in progress right now.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you would share a little bit about the motivation behind the book, but also hope that you'll dig deep and maybe share something about Tupac that nobody really knows, nobody really focuses on as it relates to his journey, which sadly, and this is the thing that strikes me the most about his life, it was so short. And I
25
often
years.
wonder what he would have been, what he would have become had he
Yeah.
lived. Talk a little bit about the book.
Well, I met Tupac in August of 1993. So I literally have been carrying around massive files, folders, his story for 31 years. I did 4 cover stories in Tupac, 3 when he was alive for Quincy Jones's Vibe magazine, including the most famous cover probably Vibe ever did. It was Dr. Dre and Snoop and Suge Knight and Tupac on the cover. It was kind of a takeoff on what's that famous movie by Scorsese? Because the Casino movie poster cover. That's where we got it from. And then the last cover story was when he died. I was actually in Vegas when he died, and it was for Rolling Stone magazine because I wasn't at Vibe anymore. And one of the saddest days of my life, I actually didn't go back to Vegas for almost 20 years after Tupac died there because I was just so affected by his death. And then obviously 6 months later, Biggie was dead. It was a lot, But something Tupac said to me when we first met, which I thought was very profound: I want you to be Alex Haley to my Malcolm X. And I remember thinking to myself, man, Malcolm X is my hero. I want to be Malcolm X. But I said it to say Tupac only lived up to be 25 years old, as you all know, and ironically, in the very first cover story I wrote on Tupac, I called him the James Dean of the hip hop era, not knowing that he would barely live as long as James Dean did. James Dean died at 24.
Yep.
Tupac at 25. James Dean meant so much to the rock and roll era, Tupac for the hip hop era. And Tupac was funny, man. He was an incredibly comedic person. And I think we never got to see the full range of who he was because his life was so hard and fast. But he was funny. He had a great sense of humor. He was brilliant. He was well read. He got that from his mother, raised by a powerful single mother, just like I was, Miss Fanny Shakur, rest in peace. And what I want to do with this book, and I was pressured to write this book literally right after he died. I was, people were throwing all kinds of money at me, and I really mean what I say. I mean, people have asked me to sell the audio tapes of Tupac Shakur. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Kev, let us listen to it. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I take too seriously, not just the craft of writing, but part of writing. My umbrella is writing, but I'm a poet. I'm a journalist. I have many things. And as a journalist, I never even took a photo with Tupac Shakur when he's alive. And I was a journalist who trusted him. People to this day have to come through my articles if they're doing a documentary, anything on Pac, they inevitably read my work. And I value that because he gave me such incredible access and trust, And, I decided in the last few years that I've got to finish this book, not because I want a New York Times bestseller or national bestseller, or I want to make a ton of money or try anything else, but because he asked me when we were young men to be Alex Haley to his Malcolm X and to tell his story. And I'm not going to knock any documentaries or books that have come out. I'm just going to say that I've been blessed to have access to people who have not talked to anyone else, who have talked to me. And it also, distance gives you the perspective, which is like when I've said to you about you writing, Kenneth, when you have some distance from things, be it a personal family tragedy or, and I consider Tupac a personal family tragedy, I needed time to really process, what did this mean? What did losing this life mean to me? How did it affect other people? But also, what's the bigger context of it? And I think that, now I'm writing it in a way that I couldn't have imagined writing it 5 or 10 years ago. And I can't wait, because I also think that when we write now, like for me and for you and other writers out there, because you are a writer, sir, you are a writer, you're a writer, I think about Frederick Douglass's narrative. I think about the poetry of Phillis Wheatley. I think about, Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes. I think about James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, Sonia Sanchez, Baraka, Maya Angelou. I'm like, this is the tradition. This is the tradition of writers, Toni Morrison, that I come out of. And so if I'm going to do a book on Tupac Shakur, it's got to be a game changer kind of book. I can't reveal what's going to be in it, but what I will say, my prayer is that people are going to need to understand that it's bigger than Tupac, and it's really about all of us.
I'm looking forward to it for sure. I have great respect for you and the craft.
Thank you.
As well as the integrity that you bring to this particular space. I'm
Thank
absolutely
you.
looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Kevin, talk to us a little bit about finding love again. I know that the love of your life, Evangeline, is a significant part of your life now. Talk to us about finding love again.
I got lucky, man.
It's just that simple.
God, yo, real talk. Like, literally, I mean, here's how crazy life is, man. And I can say it now. During COVID, I got divorced. I was supposed to get divorced in February or March early March of 2020. Everything shut down, as people know, the whole country shut down, which means the courts shut down, which means I remember when I got the news, like, well, you can't go get divorced. I was like, wait a minute. So you're like, I'm in limbo with divorce? Because I mean, anyone who's ever been through a divorce knows how painful it is. I don't want to equate it with death, but it's a profound kind of grieving. Even if the relationship wasn't going to work, it's still it's a sense of loss. And so, I sat through all of that. But in the midst of that, later in the year, my wife happened to do a review of one of my books. Again, y'all, think about it like this, as you attack diversity, equity, inclusion programs, if Kevin Powell didn't get to college because of a DEI/affirmative action program, Kevin Powell would not have been a writer who did 16 books. And one of those books, my soon-to-be wife reviewed. And this is the happiest relationship I've ever been in my life. I remember saying to myself, who's this person who just reviewed the book? I looked her up and I was blown away by her intellect, her brain. And that's how it started. That's how it started. It was started because of books. It started because of books and a mutual love of books. And man, listen, I can't even say enough. I mean, 2 of the 9 poems on the album that got nominated for a Grammy are dedicated to my wife. One is called For You. The other one's called The Love Sonnet. And you know, man, I wanted to write stuff for my wife in the spirit of Pablo Neruda, the great Latinx writer who probably was one of the most romantic poets ever. I wanted to write stuff for her, and I want to continue to write stuff for her in the spirit of the Stylistics, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Because it's like love is important, and I think one of the things that we've lost with American music across the board that really saddens me is the absence of love songs.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
mm,
A lot of us will go back and listen to Tina Marie or Chaka Khan or
mm.
whoever we love, but like we, you know, and I feel the same. Even like the poets, a lot of poets that I know, because I'm a human and civil rights activist. Kevin, you political? Why are you talking about that love stuff? I'm like, well, Dr. King talked about love a lot, so why can't I talk about love? You know what I'm saying? James Baldwin talked about love, so why can't I talk about love? You know what I
Right.
mean? And I think there's enough hate to go around, and so why can't we talk about love? And I mean, she's, you know, she's my equal partner,
Mm,
my best friend,
mm.
my confidant. We're business partners. She was there with me in Huntsville for the Dr. King program early this year. It was her first time in Huntsville, and you know, in Alabama, and it's been beautiful to take her around the South because she's from California, had never really been around the South, but we've been all over, man. Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, just traveling. Um, she's a co-producer in a film we have coming out later this year on Black manhood, Black fatherhood. Has been important to get her perspective as a Black woman who has a father and a brother and has a deep love. She does, my wife, for Black men, which is important to me, you know, and I'm just grateful. My wife is the greatest gift that God has ever given me.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Shout out to her for sure. I
yeah.
want to ask you a couple of other questions, but you invoked the name of a person that means so much to me. In fact, I posted this on April 1st on my Facebook page.
Mm,
40 years ago today, the world lost a prophet and creative musical genius. On
yes.
April 1st, 1984, I was visiting Atlanta when I got the word that Marvin Gaye had been killed by his dad, who he had a turbulent relationship with, but it was April Fool's Day. And initially, I thought it was a bad joke. The legendary Smokey Robinson called What's Going On the best album of all time. And I agree. It's a timeless message that resonates as clearly, distinctively, and accurately in 2024 as it did when it was released without the full support of Berry Gordy at Motown in 1971, over 50 years ago. I can't let you get away from this conversation, which will be one of many, I hope, over the years, without reflecting on the great Marvin Gaye.
My gosh. There's so much I want to say. Thank you. And you know, the editor in me is going to say to you, please put that in your future book. Because
It's
that
going to
was
go in there.
okay, because that's brilliant. You know what I mean? And I always see people posting stuff on social media. I'm like, that needs to be a book.
Right.
That needs to be an essay or blog. Like, I know you shared it with Facebook, but take
Right.
that. That's yours.
Right.
Let me tell you. So, my mother's favorite song is Marvin Gaye's "Pride and Joy,"
Mm,
and we didn't have much when I was growing up, but what we did have was music in my household. Lots of music, like many Black households, right? And my mother would sing "Pride and Joy" to me all the time. It was that song and Smokey Robinson's "In America Shop Around." But "Pride and Joy" would make her just feel good. Like I can go to my mama's house right now in Jersey City and just put on "Pride and Joy" for her, and she would just light up. She loved Marvin Gaye. Man, she
mm,
loved Marvin Gaye.
mm.
You know, so that was my introduction to Marvin and to Motown because of my mother. And then funny story, when I was a teenager back in the 80s, you know, the first Walkman I ever got. Remember those things,
Oh,
brother? The
yeah?
Walkmans? Well, what song came out that was huge with my first Walkman? Sexual Healing by Marvin Gaye. And
Mm.
I'm a teenager. I'm a virgin. I don't know anything. All I was hearing, wake up.
Right.
When I get that feeling, and it was going in both ears. I was like, what is this Walkman thing with sexual? I was like, sexual healing. Oh, and I mean, I wasn't totally naive, but I was like, okay. And I remember the video for it, and I was
Mhm.
like, okay. But it was like, and then my other memory of Marvin was the fact that he sang the national anthem at NBA
Mm.
All-Star Weekend,
Mm.
and I had never heard the national anthem sung like that.
Wow.
Blew my mind.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, almost about a year later,
Mm.
the news that Marvin Gaye's father had killed him.
Mm.
And I remember feeling the same kind of confusion I had felt just 4 years before when John Lennon, my
Mm.
favorite Beatle of the
Mm.
Beatles, had been killed.
Mhm.
And I couldn't understand, why would the father kill his son? I was fascinated with Marvin Gaye. I became obsessed with him through the years, because I would hear the stories. Like I was a little boy when What's Going On came out. But by the time we get to the 90s, I'm working for Quincy Jones's Vibe magazine. I'm now a full-fledged music journalist. I realized I needed to sit with what's going on. And you're absolutely right. I was like, I've never heard anything like this.
Mm.
And what struck me as I began to study that album, that What's Going On was the first album where Motown acknowledged the names of all the musicians, not just the Funk Brothers, the collective of musicians.
Yep.
But Marvin Gaye insisted on giving them credit by name. That blew my mind. It blew my mind he was talking about the Vietnam War. It blew my mind he was talking about the environment in 1971. It blew my mind that he was talking about God and spirituality on an album, but it was a pop album. And then it blew my mind that Berry Gordy didn't want the album and like, this is garbage. This will never do anything. And he was insistent as an artist. It blew my mind. You can see the transformation of Marvin Gaye from the pop star and the crooner of the 60s. He's got the goatee. He grew his hair long, eventually started wearing the kufi. I was like, he was an incredible example of the transformative power of being an artist, but staying true to yourself, because you have all these different periods of Marvin Gaye. I became a massive fan, and guess what? Bringing it back to Tupac Shakur, Tupac references Marvin Gaye in his own music. Marvin Gaye used to sing to me that black is the thing to be, on Keep Your Head Up. And the irony of it, as I started putting together the Tupac Shakur book, I realized that What's Going On came out in May 71. 1 month later, Tupac Shakur was born.
Wow.
June 71. And I was like, man, and look at the multi-generational impact that these two brothers have had on people. And then in the year 2000, Eric Sermon of the famous rap group EPMD found an obscure record in a London record shop, and he sampled Marvin Gaye saying just like music, and it became a huge hip hop in 2000. So Marvin lives, and honestly, Marvin Gaye's short life, because think about it, he was only 45.
Yeah.
He was only 45.
Yeah.
What I think about Kenneth is the fact that he did so much in such a short period of time. I mean, the Hear My Dear album, how bold is it to make an album about your divorce and say, well, here's your alimony and payment in the form of this album? I was like, Marvin is gangster, man. But what I also got from Marvin as an artist, a fellow artist, that we got to be very careful about letting the traumas overtake us. I mean, I think about the drugs, the alcohol, the various relationships with women, the accusations of all kinds of stuff with women that have come up through the years. But I love him. I play What's Going On often. I was so happy when a few years ago, you probably have come across this album as well. There was an album that he did between Let's Get It On and What's Going On. What's Going On first, and Let's Go Get It On came out in 73. But he actually did an album called it became known as What Is a Man in 72. Right around the time he did a Trouble Man soundtrack that never got released. And I started listening to that. I was like, this is some brilliant stuff. It was almost like it was an extension of What's Going On. Do you know that album at all?
I do, yes.
Yeah. But then I discovered this man loved Nat King Cole. This man loved Sam Cooke. So I have all these albums of Marvin Gaye doing jazz standards, Broadway show tunes from the 1960s. Well, who can say they have that range of work over 3 decades the way Marvin Gaye did?
Wow. Very powerful indeed.
Yeah.
I have just a couple more things to cover because I see our time is short, but
No
I
problem.
got to ask you referenced earlier, you're living in Brooklyn, one of my favorite boroughs. Of course, I was born and raised in Manhattan, but spent significant time in Brooklyn, had 2 sisters that lived there over the years. Talk to us about what the Brooklyn vibe is all about.
Brooklyn's a funny place. Like I actually didn't want to live here. When I moved to New York, I moved to New York City specifically to pursue my writing career as my life as a writer in 1990, the summer of 1990, August 1990. I'll never forget it. I lived uptown. I wanted to be in Harlem. Why Harlem? The Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Connie Cullen. Why Harlem? Malcolm X was had been in Harlem. Harlem was it, man. Duke Ellington, Lena Horne. I mean, the list is endless. And then, before I moved to New York, I used to party at the Rooftop in Harlem, one of the early hip hop clubs. You know what I mean? And then you got Rucker in Harlem, the famous basketball tournament. You know what I'm saying? I had cousins who were from Harlem who lived up in the Polo Grounds, all of that. So Harlem is where I wanted to be, but I kept hearing about, and Brooklyn, honestly, we thought Brooklyn was crazy, man. Because so even though I didn't live in New York to 1990, being from Jersey City, we're cousins of New
Oh
York
yeah.
City, North
Oh yeah.
Jersey. So I was going to clubs in New York City from 1984, 85 up, and every time I went to a party in New York City, a club in New York City, they would always say, "Where Harlem at?" A lot of Harlem people, Uptown. Where's Uptown? Where's the Bronx? Where's Queens? Where's Staten Island? Whatever. It'd be one person from Staten Island, like one. You know what I'm saying? But then you say Brooklyn, it was like 1,000 people, and they was just thugged out. And I was like, "Yo, what is wrong with these Brooklyn people?" Never did I think I'd become a Brooklyn person. I've lived in Brooklyn longer than I've lived anywhere in my life, man.
Wow.
33, 34 years now. But literally in the 1990s, and Nelson George, one of our great
Mm,
writers, documents this in a documentary. We had our own flourishing of our version of the Harlem Renaissance in the 19. He had Mos Def in Brooklyn. Common was here. Erykah Badu was here. People like myself were here. We had so many writers and dancers, other creators. Spike Lee, Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
In fact, Spike Lee is one of the reasons why I fell in love with Brooklyn, because I was watching Do the Right Thing
mm,
and other movies that were set in Brooklyn.
mm,
And I was fat. And then my favorite rapper ever is Big Daddy Kane. Where's he
mm,
from? Brooklyn. Where's
mm,
Jay-Z from? Brooklyn. Where's
mm.
Biggie from? Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And there was a pride. And I think for me, and as someone from Manhattan, the boroughs, we all it's like a family. You can tell Manhattan folks, you can tell Uptown folks, you can
Mhm.
tell Queens folks, you can tell Brooklyn folks. And even though when we leave New York City, it's New York City. We're like, yo, you from New York City? Yeah, me too. You know what I mean? But
Right.
inside New York City, you take pride in your one of the five boroughs. You represent that. And I love my hometown of Jersey City. It made me who I was, but I've never felt the kind of cultural connection that I felt to Brooklyn. Like Brooklyn for me is what Harlem became for Langston Hughes,
Mm,
even
mm,
though Langston was born in Joplin, Missouri. Brooklyn is for me is what Harlem became for Malcolm X. Malcolm was born in Omaha, Nebraska,
mm.
but they became men in Harlem. I became a man in Brooklyn. That's the
Yeah.
best way I can describe it.
Wow, that's powerful. Speaking
Yeah.
of becoming a man, you've got a film, as you mentioned, coming out on manhood. Talk to us a
Yes.
little bit about that.
It's called When We Free the World. We interviewed literally 5 years this year, this April, this year, I'm sorry, not this year, makes 5 years that we started working on this film, and it's finally done. Kenneth, let me tell you, brother, making a documentary film without real funding. And it started off as a small idea. Originally, I was going to do a short music video based on a song, and then expand it to 10 minutes. And I said, well, I should do 30 minutes. It's a 2-hour feature-length documentary film. We interviewed 60 Black men that cover 5 generations of Black males, literally from a 13-year-old to 90-something-year-old Black men are in the film.
Mm,
And we deal with a range of stuff. And think about it, in these 5 years, we've had the rise of Donald Trump and this ridiculous, insane kind of racism that has existed with some of these MAGA folks, the attacks on DEI, what happened to George Floyd. I mean, we can go through a list of stuff, and we've lost a lot of brothers. And the film deals with history. It deals with fatherhood, manhood, mental health. We deal with suicide. We deal with violence in all forms, including domestic violence. We deal with racism, yes, but we also deal with sexism, homophobia, transphobia. We deal with ableism. We have brothers who are disabled in the film. We have formerly incarcerated brothers in the film. We have brothers who are college educated in the film. I'm proud of the fact out of the 60 Black males in the film, Kenneth, at least 20 are PhDs. You know what I
wow.
mean? Because we
Yeah.
wanted to show a range of Black males. And what we did, honestly, and I'm a big film lover anyway, but we realized when you think about documentary films on Black men, usually only as athletes or entertainers or us responding to racism, you very rarely see us as whole human beings. You very rarely see us having these kind of conversations.
Mhm.
One of the reasons why I love doing interviews like this with folks like yourself, I get to be a whole Black man.
Mm,
I love
mm,
sports. I
mm,
love music.
mhm.
But I also love the fact that we can talk about a range of things.
Yeah.
And that's what we do with this film. I think some of the most tender parts of the film, and when brothers are talking about being fathers
Mm,
or having been fathered, and the brothers who are fatherless, because we're not going to keep showing only brothers who don't have fathers like myself. That's unfair to the Black men who actually are fathers,
mm,
who had fathers in their lives, as if they
mhm,
don't exist. You know what I
mhm,
mean?
mhm.
And so it'll be out later this year. We'll be announcing it. Streaming platforms, multiple streaming platforms. We'll be doing big premieres in New York and LA, but we're going to come back to Huntsville. We also have a study guide. I'm so proud of this. for grade school, high school, and for adults, no matter what their educational backgrounds. And it's going to include all kinds of resources and services for Black males, things to read, to watch, to listen to, because we don't want people to just have this experience and not have any follow-up. We're going to have tools for follow-up and how to become self-empowered as Black males, because we realize, honestly, Kenneth, with these continued attacks on DEI and other things and banning of books, as you know, I think I've thought about, yeah, they can do those things. People can do those things, but no one can stop us from wanting to learn for ourselves.
Yes.
No one can stop us from wanting to empower ourselves. We have a whole history, even during segregation, when folks like, you can't come here, you can't do this, you can't vote. Nothing stopped us from doing for ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kevin, this has been an amazing hour, and I am so
Thank you.
grateful that you have allowed me to pick your brain for this period of time,
Thank
at
you.
least as an initial experience, because I'm going to respectfully give you time to do the many things you're doing, but you'll get that email or that text message again saying, hey, you got a little time for me coming up, and we'll pre-record
Absolutely.
something or whatever we need to
Well, we
do.
should do it I would like to do it in person when we come back to Huntsville with the film. I think we should do that in person and talk about the film after you've seen it. We showed it in the community. Let's do something and maybe film the whole thing, have a conversation
Oh,
with folks.
yeah.
We
Oh,
should do that.
I think that
Yeah.
would be
With
good
Black
for sure.
males. With
Yeah.
Black males. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would be powerful. And I know that there are a lot of people who would be on board with that type of experience. You have a huge social media presence. You got a website out there. Let people know how they can find out more about Kevin Powell.
Well, for my website is actually being rebuilt because it's my fault because I'm taking too long to get my team things. This is what happens when you travel a lot. You know how it goes.
Right.
But Instagram, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn. My Facebook is the same thing, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn. And then X/Twitter is Kevin_Powell, Kevin_Powell. I'm also on the new platform Threads, which is the same thing as Instagram, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn. And then, people can have my email address. I'm good with that. Kevin@kevinpowell.net, Kevin@kevinpowell.net. And, look for the film this year, next year, 2025. Can you believe that it's a quarter century into the new century? It's
That's
crazy.
wow.
It was just 2000, bro. It was just 2000 like yesterday.
I'm
And we were
telling
scared
you.
about what was going to happen to
I know.
us. But next year, the Tupac Shakur book is coming out and my next spoken word poetry album. But we're going to be touring with the film. I want to come back to that for 1 second, if I may, this last
Yep.
piece. We're definitely going to come to Huntsville. We're definitely going to be going around the country because we don't want to just put the film out there. We want to have community conversations with all people, but especially Black males of all ages with this Black male film. I'm really excited about the conversation that we fostered. And I'm just, I say it to you, brother. We have lives that we've lived that we've been very blessed, to have. You have shared your story with me, which I think is such an powerful story. And I'm here to be as supportive of you as you've been of me and so many other people, and know that I'm your brother for the rest of your life.
Well, I appreciate that because my book is absolutely being developed right now. I'm
Excellent.
writing some. And
Good,
as I said, I'm going to share a few samples with you relatively soon.
good,
So
good.
thank you for your mentorship and your willingness to guide me in that process.
No, thank you. I didn't want to say he's got a book coming out, but you just said it. So now you got to do it.
Hey, it's happening. And I'm going to say this too because you inspired, you gave me credit for it because I said it, but you inspired the title. And this is how we talk about iron
Mm,
sharpens iron because you had a couple of pieces of iron talking about various things,
wow.
and you said something to me that triggered something in my mind, and I started talking about the journey, and
Yes.
then you kind of honed that into because of the journey, and I was like,
Yes.
well, wait a minute, I think you
Yeah.
got something here. So that's actually the name of the book.
We were in a car. I don't know if we were going to the Black-owned vegan restaurant in Huntsville. What's the name of that restaurant, by the way? What's that restaurant?
The Vuji Vegan.
Man, that food was good.
It was.
I wish they could ship me some food, brother.
Hey, I'm gonna ask some questions, and we'll see what we can do.
All right. But I remember that. But this is why Black men and men in general, because even though our film is centered on Black men, one of the things that we keep saying throughout our documentary, men have to talk.
Yep.
And again, a lot of us can talk a lot about sports, a lot about money, a lot about our jobs and careers, a lot about women, and we happen to be straight brothers like us. But I'm like, hey, just the fact that we had honest, open, vulnerable conversations, you got your book title. And all I did was listen. I was like, man, there it is right there. I'm just giving it right back to you. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Yeah.
It was a powerful moment of both confirmation and affirmation. And
Yes,
again,
sir.
I thank you for that. So I'm excited.
Thank you. And thank you for having me here. This has been this has made my day just doing this, having this conversation with you. And then, and I'll say this to you, as I say to other folks like you, I prefer these types of shows because we get to really talk and flesh things out. People, always ask me, Kev, how come you're not on CNN as like you used to be? I don't want to argue with people. I mean, we can agree to disagree civilly. I'm down with that, but I'm not here to be entertainment for people. I'll actually, I start where I end it. This work is for God. This work is for the people. This is not to be famous, to make money. I'm not, if that happens, God, thank God. But what are we doing if we're not trying to help people? I'm not trying to be an entertainment piece for people to make people feel good and sensationalize stuff. You brought up something very serious in the conversation about the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to say it again. I would not exist without those kind of programs in the way that I do now.
That's right. And ditto on that. Kevin Powell, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
My brother from another mother, holding it down in Brooklyn and around the nation and the world. Until we meet again.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.